Welcome to Zoom In, Zoom Out, where we take an in-depth look at how news from Taiwan is impacting the world. I'm Betty Chen. Just recently, Taiwan Fact Check Center issues a report on the latest finding on disinformation, which is 7 months before the upcoming presidential election. According to the report, it shows multiple sources of disinformation, how it impacts our society, as well as the potential solutions. But how can we ensure that the voters are better protected by having this kind of knowledge? Joining us on the show, we are honored to have invited Mr. Chihhao, co-director of research organization IORG. Chihhao, please say hi to our audience.
Hi, happy to be here. I'm Chihhao.
Chihhao, you're an expert in this area. Could you please tell us a bit more about what these reports are about and what kind of challenge are Taiwanese people facing right now?
Okay, yes. To the best of my knowledge, a lot of organizations and academics, scholars, researchers have been looking at the phenomenon that some might call disinformation. In IORG, we call them information manipulation. Organizations such as Taiwan Fact Check Center and different professors in different universities have been doing research. But one key thing about these research is that it has to be consistent. It has to happen every year so that we can know more about these long-term trends. So this conference is a continuation of their previous work, and I think this is very valuable for us to know more about what is wrong with our information environment and how are people feeling about these phenomena and what do people think we should do collectively to solve these problems. From our own research and interviews at IORG with various actors across Taiwan, including, of course, researchers, civil society organizations, community activists, school teachers, pretty much everyone agrees that information manipulation has been going on at least since 2018. And pretty much everyone also agrees that information manipulation has been affecting the quality of our public debate in a negative way. People feel that it's more difficult to talk about public affairs, especially when these discussions are happening in an online environment.
You just talk about the important elements of disinformation, and also there are a lot of good actors like yourself trying to address these issues. But could you please tell us what exactly is disinformation?
So disinformation is defined at the intersection of malinformation, which is information with bad intent, and misinformation, which is false content. So disinformation is both false and with bad intention to harm. But it's very difficult to determine the intention of a piece of information. Sometimes we don't even know where this piece of information is coming from. So at IORG, we prefer the term information manipulation. And we have a much clearer definition, a framework, a classification about information manipulation. So one of the examples that is also featured in one of our recent reports from IORG is a narrative regarding TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, setting up new facilities in the US. And this narrative, according to our data set, has been spreading since January last year, all the way until before our local elections in November. This narrative distorts the opinion of military experts and scholars in the US and just claims that the US has this active plan to destroy Taiwan, which is a rhetoric, or which is a theory that is baseless. So in our framework of determining the credibility of different kinds of narratives, we find this to be manipulative.
Thank you very much for your clear explanation. And my next question is, in Taiwan's media environment, so where do you think that the disinformation mainly come from? Who might be behind the disinformation? Any particular organizations, groups, or individuals with specific intent?
according to our data set, a lot of these narratives are being created by Chinese state actors. At the same time, other narratives are being created by Taiwanese actors. And this creates all sorts of questions in terms of not only in terms of research, but also in terms of regulation and public education. And also there are economic incentives that because of the close business ties between the two countries, and because of how geographically close is Taiwan from China, it does make it easier for influence to sort of transfer across the Taiwan Strait. And all of that contribute to, or in the minds of Chinese actors, they want all of these factors to contribute to political behavioral change, specifically or more concretely, how Taiwanese people vote and how that vote could potentially benefit China and China's strategic goals.
So thank you for talking about these important events, and I think these are just good examples showing that is Taiwan really more susceptible to disinformation compared to other countries? What's your take on that?
If we want to answer the question, is Taiwan more susceptible to Chinese influence, then maybe an obvious example would be, is Ukraine more susceptible to Russian influence? And experts might agree that because two countries, Taiwan and China, and then Ukraine and Russia, have similarities in culture, in language, so that we, Taiwan or Ukraine, are more susceptible to outside influence. We've seen from our data sets that some of these narratives created by Chinese actors, they know pretty well what's going on in Taiwan. What are the things that are causing divide in Taiwan? For example, partisanship is a really big factor in Taiwanese society in terms of political decision, in terms of public opinion formation. There has been academic research suggesting that people choose which vaccines to take according to their partisan affiliation, not according to scientific evidence of the effectiveness of each vaccines. We see other political science research in Taiwan showing similar things, that partisanship is the number one factor influencing a lot of public behavior in Taiwanese society. So because of cultural similarities between Taiwan and China, actors there might know better about Taiwan and how to manipulate.
So thank you, Chihhao, for breaking down this issue for us. And now I'd like to zoom out a little bit, and we're going to see how the government is coping with disinformation before the election. Let's take a look.
Taiwan is watching for possible meddling by China in the country's upcoming elections. Voters will go to the polls next January to elect the country's next president as well as lawmakers. But there are concerns that Beijing plans to spread disinformation to influence the vote. National Security Bureau Director Tsai Ming-yen says his agency is on the lookout for any attempts by China to sway the election.
注意到中国有没有透过刚刚所提到的假讯息或认知作战的操作，来影响台湾民众在政治上的一个偏好，甚至去影响我们民主选举的结果。
So now people are all talking about the importance of understanding disinformation. So my question is, how is Taiwan's government collaborating with disinformation research centers like your organizations? Do you think that the government has done enough?
Okay, in this issue of information manipulation or disinformation, both governments and civil society actors are very important in terms of collectively solving this problem or confronting this problem. In terms of fact-checking, it is solely a civil society effort because government in a democratic society should not be the arbiter of truth. So third-party independent organizations such as Taiwan Fact Check Center is doing the work of fact-checking so that we can come together on the foundation of fact and truth and scientific evidence so that we can have more conversations, even differences, about how or where our country is going in the future. I think in terms of government and civil society collaboration, we can take inspiration from civic hacking communities in Taiwan, such as GovZero, which builds collaboration across different stakeholders, not just government, not just civil society organizations, but sometimes also companies, sometimes also other actors, international actors. Bring all those stakeholders together on the basis of openness and transparency, which in my own opinion, are two very important values to build trust and then build collaboration on top of trust.
So thank you for sharing. You just talked about the important aspect of transparency and openness, which can be a top-down and also a bottom-up approach. So my next question is, next year we're going to have the presidential election. How can we tell our people, like what you said, how can we maybe use science or how can we educate the public to be more aware of disinformation?
Because there's a risk of foreign influence into our elections, civil society should step up the effort of election watching in Taiwan. And we should learn from our neighbors how they do their job, how they monitor their elections. And we should do the same. Because if you live in Taiwan and know more about elections in Taiwan, especially local elections, you would know that our elections are not problem-free. Again, going back to the idea of openness and transparency, these monitoring efforts should be done in this election, in this coming election. And both the results and the methodology of these monitoring efforts should be published after the election. Maybe we won't find anything significant. Maybe we will. But we wouldn't know the truth unless we look at it, unless we open the box and look at it. We should also be more open and transparent in terms of not just what we found, but also how we do our work. How do we do our research? What kind of data are we using? What kind of algorithms are we using? For example, in terms of polling organizations release their data and their methodologies so that their results are more credible, more trustworthy. And at IORG, we release our research methodologies and we share our data sets with other academics so that they can trust us more. So you can actually go to those content that we think are manipulative and decide for yourself. So we strongly believe that in a democratic society, individual citizens have to be able to make their independent, informed decision. And I think both government and civil society should see that as their first priority. How do we, government agencies, civil society organizations, researchers, news media organizations, how do we, these powerful institutions in our democratic society, all contribute to inform our citizens more with trustworthy information, with scientific evidence, so that more citizens are more capable in terms of making good decisions, so that we can, collectively, through our democratic process, decide the direction of our country together.
Thank you, Chihhao, so much for what you have done, and thank you so much for your work and your organization. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you for joining us on today's show. Thank you very much. This is Zoom In, Zoom Out. For more news from Taiwan, you can find TaiwanPlus on Facebook and Twitter. We'll see you next time.